Figure out how I could get out of this. From conversations today and this evening, I think many of you expected Chuck to be here tonight as your class president to welcome you to this gathering. On January 21st, Chuck died after a long battle with Alzheimer's. I call it the disease from hell because that's what we went through those last few years. So tonight I stand here as your vice president, welcoming you back to Carson Newman and to our 50-year reunion. 3 days before Chuck passed away, Dan Slaper came to visit. Dan and Chuck had roomed together their sophomore year. We propped Chuck up on the couch so he could lean against Dan and they could share some of their memories from Carson Newman. You have to understand that Chuck couldn't put a complete sentence together at that time. And it was very hard for him to even think of what he wanted to say. But I helped him out, and tonight I want to share those memories that Chuck had and tried to share with Dan. Chuck said when his parents brought him to Carson Newman and dropped him off, he absolutely hated his parents that day. Chuck had worked hard and earned the money to pay to go to college, but yet his parents chose the school that he should go to. And Chuck said, I just didn't think that was right. If you remember Chuck, or if you ever knew him, when he arrived at Carson Newman, he had long red hair that came down to his shoulders, beautiful hair. He had signed to play football here at Carson Newman, and the tradition at that time was for the upperclassmen to shave the freshmen' heads. He said, I stepped out of that car, and all these upperclassmen from the football team were standing there. Some had razors in their hands, some had scissors in their hands. And he said, I knew by the end of the night, every hair on my head was going to be gone. You have to understand, when his parents brought him to school, they opened the door, they let him out of the car, they said goodbye, and they drove away. And Chuck said, that gave me even more hatred. Chuck's first week in the dorm brought many new experiences for him. His first roommate told him when he moved in that day, he said, we're all going to Knoxville tonight for $1 beer night, and we expect you to go with us. Chuck thought that was so extravagant because he didn't have extra dollars. He said, guys, I just can't spend that kind of money on something so silly. So they all got their money together. They took Chuck with them and paid his bar bill for the $1 beer night. Chuck recalled the year that we got married, the end of our junior year, what a struggle it was for us to put food on the table. We would get every extra odd job we could get to buy groceries and continue paying things that we owed to Carson Newman. We lived in an apartment downtown. We paid $75 a month, and that included all of our utilities. Our apartment was off limits to female students, and you had to have written permission for females to come visit you at the apartment if they were Carson Newman students. You know I abided by that rule. My goal at Carson Newman was to break every rule that I possibly could. Chuck talked that night about Carson Newman relationships and how they had continued all these years. Dwight and Elaine Stokes were some of our dearest friends, and Ellen and Debbie Stair. Now, I don't know if you remember them. They were the house parents over at Newman's dorm, I think. We all lived in the same subdivision together. As a matter of fact, for many years, we lived on the same street. Carl and Janet Torbush became dear friends. After their retirement, they moved to Sevierville. We became close friends, and they were in church with us. Carl and I just loved to get on the phones and talk about past football games at the University of Tennessee, the University of North Carolina, Carson Newman. Man, we talked for hours and hours. And then Janet became a dear friend, and we would go eat, we would go walk, and we would just sit around and talk. Carl passed away in 23, and I felt that I needed to pay more attention to Janet at that time and help her with the struggles of dealing with her husband passing. Well, lo and behold, Chuck died this past year, so Janet became my mentor. And she would call and she would encourage me and tell me things that I needed to do to get through this period of time. But Janet died this past week. Broke my heart, and I don't know what I'm going to do without her. Chuck also had a relationship with another Carson Newman graduate, Richard Wallace. They were in the law practice together for many, many years. One summer back in the 1980s, we took our children and we were traveling. We'd gone up in the Northeast. Every time we took a vacation and got to a new state, we had to see the football stadiums at the major university. We had to see the basketball arena. We had to see the state capitol. And if there were any large cathedrals or churches, we had to visit those too. Well, we had come to the University of Virginia. We had done our tour. I'm trying to find where she's sitting before I say her name. I see her now. There at the University of Virginia, we walked into a little deli to get our lunch. I heard this lady talking. She had the loudest voice I had ever heard in my life. And then all of a sudden I thought, I know that person from Carson Newman. Sue Barker. And Chuck at that moment said, you know, no matter where you go in life, there's always somebody from Carson Newman. You know, when I started tonight, I mentioned how Chuck hated his parents after they brought him to Carson Newman. But later, Chuck told me after many, many years, he finally realized that it was God's plan for him to be at Carson Newman. And his time at Carson Newman was you. He loved you guys so much, and in those final months, he would ask me, is it time for the reunion? I would tell him how many months it was, how many weeks it was. He wanted so bad to be here with you tonight, but it just didn't happen. But I want to ask you, where would you be? What would you have done in life if you had not come to Carson Newman? In cleaning some of Chuck's books and papers beside his favorite chair downstairs, I found a little cartoon clipping, and I picked it up this week and looked at it again. It was Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. They were walking out in the woods, they were holding hands and walking down this dirt road. And the caption read, "A friend is one of the nicest things you can have, and one of the best things that you can be." And I want to thank each and every one of you for being our friends.